you have a line when you walk into a board meeting and you talk to them. Kevin, do you remember what that line was that you say all the time?
The first thing out of my mouth is often double the marketing budget, but it kind of jolts people, and then they want to know why, right? So I can back that up. Credit unions just don't have that history of complexity in marketing. They're ramping up so quickly. And I'm not blowing smoke when I say that, because frankly, often the case is you need to double your marketing budget.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nikki Doherty, brand ambassador at Epicosity, and welcome to The Going Rate. Joining me is my favorite co-host, Jay Bachmeyer.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Jay. Good morning.
Good morning.
And you guys, we have a very, very special guest joining us today. Please say hi to Kevin Smith. He is a consultant, a publisher with Team Resources. And Kevin has such an impressive background. He's a co-author, of a credit union guide to strategic governance. He's worked for CUNA in the Center for Professional Development. He facilitates strategic planning sessions, goes through the processes, but truly what Kevin does is he nourishes the growth of leaders in the credit union industry. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. See, Kevin and I have had the opportunity to work together when I was the marketing director at a credit union. Okay. And Kevin, you joined us at our board strategic planning session, and my favorite thing from you is always when you said you have a line when you walk into a board meeting and you talk to them. And Kevin, do you remember what that line was that you say all the time?
Oh, absolutely, I do, because I use it pretty regularly. And the first thing out of my mouth is often double the marketing budget. It throws off board members, but it kind of gets them ready for, this is going to be a little different. So,
I think that's every marketer's dream when you have a guest come into your strategic planning session and that's the first thing out of your mind. I remember I instantly fell in love with you. I'm like, this is my guy. This is my guy.
I've got your back.
Yeah, you always do. Oh my gosh, I love it. But hey, Kevin, outside of that line and everything, you do a marvelous job at educating boards and kind of bringing them current and talking about the importance of marketing. So I was wondering, can you just share a little bit about what you see the role as a marketer is in the growth of a financial institution?
So it's really complicated these days. It's evolving and it's getting so much more complex. So I primarily work with credit unions. The history of credit unions was that they had a single sponsor and they didn't really do marketing. It's not something that they needed to do. And it's not been that long ago. So some credit unions are kind of caught behind the eight ball on this. They're learning marketing. They're doing it very quickly in the grand scheme of things. So that's one of the things that I need to make sure boards understand, CEOs understand, that this is a major investment, right? It's going to have a lot more zeros behind that number than they might be ready for, but this is an investment. So there's still a learning curve in the credit union industry, but that kind of echoes what's going on in financial services out there. We're competing with Apple and Chime and all these Apple's not a financial services per se, but now we're competing directly with them. So the marketing philosophy, the marketing approach, the marketing investment has to evolve very quickly. Now, put that parallel with how our world has changed in the last 3 or 4 years. And we have to move quicker than we have been ready for. This is challenging environment, but there are people out there who get this and know how to do it. We need to make sure everybody is set for that kind of quick evolution and ready to move.
You're right. I think a lot of times when board or sometimes even the senior leadership team think of competition, they're worried about the institution next door. And I
That's right.
love that you talked about Apple and Chime and everything too. And I know you and I briefly talked, but Jay and I just went to a conference not too long ago, and we were talking with people that are payment systems, big players in the world, and their goal is how to get your car and their card connected so that they can make purchases at McDonald's from their vehicle, right? And when we talk about credit unions and some financial institutions that are trying to gear up their marketing, they're still working in Excel spreadsheets and worried about online loan applications and can I join online? So there
Right.
are some movers.
And that's our competition, right?
Right.
Is people that are ready and willing to do that. So it can be a little bit overwhelming. It can be intimidating, but the right kind of investment, and that's what this is an investment that's not going to pay off in 6 months or a year. It's going to take some time, but we need to be ready and willing to move quicker than we were in the past. And that's one upside to the pandemic. Credit unions who thought it took 2 years to do everything found out they could do things in 2 months. Right?
Right.
We can do this. So we're poised to do this in a better way than we have been in the past. Though we had our arms twisted to do it, let's take advantage of that kind of momentum. But we need to lean into it. It's challenging.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I think, Kevin, a lot of our marketing friends, the directors, CMOs, they know this, they realize this. They're ready to go. So, do you have any advice for those people and how to maybe approach their board or their CEO on the fact that they need to scale up a little bit on their marketing efforts?
Yeah, this is challenging, particularly for board members. That board members may not have a marketing background, and they may not be coming from this world. And I was thinking about this morning. There's a tightrope balance here for the marketing people. We are always warning. We don't want the board to be in the weeds, right? We don't want them down in operations. But here's a scenario where I think the marketing leadership needs to make sure they're spending enough time with the board explaining what branding means, explaining the nuances of this. We don't want to bring them down into marketing decisions. Man, the credit unions that I've got board members who are raising their hand and saying, "Why aren't you advertising in the Sunday paper?" And it's that kind of down in the weeds. So we want to avoid that. But at the same time, the marketing people need to make sure that, and sometimes this is senior leadership too, more often boards, that they really understand the nuance of marketing and branding. That it's not buying billboards, that it's not advertising in the paper. This is a different animal. So there's a little bit of legwork that needs to be done. It needs to be thoughtful and careful to make sure that you're not bringing them down into the operational decision-making level. And for the senior leadership, sometimes this is really bringing it to the pragmatic, right, to the ROI. That's what CFOs and CEOs are looking for. They want to know, when is this going to pay for itself and when is this going to be profitable? The fact of the matter is, so much of marketing is art, right? And, it's hard to tie some of these things together. And some of this may have a really long tail to it. So making sure that you're collaborating, that you're doing these things in parallel, and making sure that people understand the depth of this, so that so you can bring some ROI to the table while explaining some of this is going to be trial, some of this is we need to try some things, and understand that some of these things are going to fail, but that's okay because it's calculated and we're going to learn from it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kevin, real quick. So Nikki has often described you to me as the board whisperer. So curious,
Flattering.
how do you, kind of with that said, how do you provide enough distinction between the importance of branding and the importance of those bottom line conversions, those service offerings, those special rates? How do you get the board to really understand the difference between the two and the importance of investing in both?
Yeah, that's a good angle on this. I don't think I bring anything that spectacular to the boardroom. I appreciate it, but I think the angle that Nikki is talking about here is that I'm an outsider, and I have clients all over the country, so I bring in perspective. And sometimes it's simply that outsider's perspective that may be saying exactly what the chief marketing officer has been saying, but suddenly they believe me. And it's just bringing in that outside perspective. So I want to make sure, because I speak board, right? I speak the language of boards. That's my focus. So I have to understand what's happening at the operational level so I can translate that and say, hey, look, do you see what they've been doing over the last year? That's fabulous. That's going to pay off in about 18 months, but you have to do it now. The board doesn't always have that connection. So I have to be a translator that understands the operational level and the board level about staying at the strategic. So hopefully that's the value I bring. And by you should be a throwaway line, double the marketing budget, but it kind of jolts people. And then they want to know why, right? So I can back that up. And it's just more complicated. And credit unions just don't have that history of complexity in marketing. They're ramping up so quickly. So I have to be an ally. And I'm not blowing smoke when I say that, because frankly, often the case is you need to double your marketing budget.
Which we all appreciate.
Yeah, we do. Well, I think the biggest picture here is I'm from credit union land. I believe wholeheartedly in the philosophy. We know that when people have access to capital and what they can do for their members, in the term of lifestyle. And I get, we've all been there where boards are like, you have to talk about, I want to be in the Sunday paper, or where's that rate, or how are we attracting it? And so sometimes they do need to see that whole branding element. I know, Kevin, you were with us when we renamed and redid Explorers Credit Union, and that brand was more than just rates, right? It aligned with personal values and missions and really kind of set us apart. What are your thoughts on that, Kevin? Because I know you and I worked together on that.
So I was just coming to work with you. This was like my first year, and seeing that transition. So I being able to watch you go through that, it was very impressive. But you did a lot of work translating this to the board, right? And explaining what brand values were. And this was more than rates, and it was more than billboards, and it's certainly more than a logo. Yeah. So really making sure that you explain this top to bottom and get buy-in. When you get buy-in from the board, they're going to give you some leeway, they're going to give you some patience, and then see that pay off. And you were very thoughtful about how that name change, that brand change was going to sit in the context of that location.
Right.
That is not simple work. That's really deep, thoughtful work. Boards need to have some understanding and some empathy for how deep that is, because the expectation off the bat can be, we'll offload that to some local graphic designer who will sketch out a new logo, right? No. It's much deeper than that. And I saw the work that you did, the work that you and April did, and others, to translate to that to the board so that they had the buy-in. And now 4 or 5 years later, we're seeing how that is just creeping through the area and how it's paying off. But it's not a simple, you can't hand them a 5-page report and expect that to work. There's some human connection there that translates that.
Just like you want your brand to have a human connection. It's what you need to do in the boardroom when you're presenting and talking to your senior staff and your board members, correct,
And
Kevin?
marketers are good storytellers. You have to remind yourself that you have to do some of that to senior management and to the board, right? It's not just doing it to the members. Like, translate that skill and use it in some different contexts. Don't undersell that part.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's really a good way of kind of recapping the idea that, competition isn't just local, but it's national. And the way to distinguish yourself in the market, I mean, the short-term answer is always going to be the rate offers, but the long-term answer is crafting a better story, crafting a different story. You might not be able to compete on the technology level. You might not be able to compete on the website experience, but if you craft a unique and interesting story, that is the way to compete without having to have, the budget of the big boys, right?
That's exactly right. This is a differentiator, and it's a human approach that will make things sticky, right? You get people in based on the values. And I know Explorers has some stories about people who were depositing money beyond the insurance levels, and it was like, wait, what are you doing here, right? No, we only trust you. I don't care whether it's insured or not. We only trust you. Boy, that's gold these days, right?
Yeah.
We don't care about the context. We don't care about the rate because we trust you. That's the stickiness that will pay off when it's done thoughtfully. And this comes directly from Nikki's efforts here. I'll tell you.
Well, I think, Epicossi was my partner at that point in time too, when I was in the marketing chair. So they do really have a good way of making sure like that you figure out who your brand is and help you through that process too. And that's what we did with Explorers. And it did. Once you know at the core who you are, then everything else falls in place, I think. And then it's so helpful for marketers to say, like, this is who we are. This is the lane that we're in. This is who we're attracting. And I think the board members can see that too as you grow and you show that down the line. So it was really good. It was good.
Absolutely.
But Kevin, what do you think future-wise? Let's look like 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road. What does this look like for the credit union marketing friends, and where do credit unions and your boards need to go in the future? Bring out your crystal ball, Kevin. Let's just speak inside for a minute.
Terrifying question, right? So I was thinking about this, and sometimes I'm finding myself falling flat-footed here, and I need to ramp up my own thinking, because last year when ChatGPT came out, I was thinking, oh great, I'm going to start learning this because this is going to be important in a year or two. And 6 months later, I was behind the curve, right? And I was thinking the same thing about AI. Okay, well, we're going to learn this, and it's going to be important in a couple of years. And I already feel behind. And so I think part of this is, and I've heard people say, I hate this phrase, but I'm going to use it, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. Right? We've got to lean. There are things happening faster than we're ready for. But if we can lean in and be ready to make some mistakes and learn and move forward, then we're going to capture some momentum. Things like AI and ChatGPT, they're moving very quickly, and they can be such useful tools. We have to be ready to learn things more quickly than we were in the past. That means marketing people are going to have to get buy-in quicker than they were able to in the past. But to always be on that razor's edge of learning. Now, maybe your organization isn't ready to deploy in 6 months, but individuals need to be ready to learn this as quickly as possible. So when the timing is right, you're not waiting. This is a level of leaning in that is I'm waffling here, right? I tend to be somebody who leans in, not bleeding edge, but fast follower.
Correct. Yep.
And this is pushing me. This is pushing me like, okay, I'm going to have to do this and try it. So I have to move from fast follower closer to bleeding edge. Marketing people need to be ahead of people like me, right? So what that next thing is, but I really see some of these tools changing the way marketers are doing business, and hopefully it's providing some efficiencies, right? We can do things on a dime that we're taking much longer than they were in the past. So being ready for that, but being ready to go. I think that is just the wave of the future. You know, how many more cliches can I come up with? But you know what I'm saying, right? Because there's an element of truth to them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's great advice because, you know, people can't predict the future. Even the markets can't predict it, right? They've been saying forever, there's a recession right around the corner. There's a recession right around the corner. Yet consumer spending remains strong. Now they're saying again, oh, it's coming. And it's like, even with all of these predictions, it doesn't change the fact that things are going to eventually happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if you have the resources, to your point, get on top of it now. Like, we don't need to wait to find out whether ChatGPT is going to be the changer of everything, or maybe it's nothing. But if you at least look at it today and you start to prepare for it, then when it does happen, you're ready. And that almost translates to brand, right? It's like, you know, oh, I know that I'm not competing in the marketplace. I know that I share the same name as a bunch of other financial institutions. I have the same service and offerings. My message is exactly the same. But like, then start now. Now is the time to act, because you wait in another year, it's not going to change. Your position didn't change. You didn't do anything with the consumer. So it's you have to act today. And I really like that mindset from you, Kevin.
Yeah, so much of small financial institutions is doing the catch-up game. And to a certain degree, that's always going to be the case. You don't have the budget the B of A has. But getting out of that constant catch-up into the mindset that there's always new and different. We're not just catching up, we're ready for the next. And some of that's going to be a mindset shift. But, you know, lobbying for the appropriate budget, you're never going to get as much as you want, right? But getting something that is appropriate so that you can move the needle and be ready to go. And I'll always come back you up and ask for double.
So on that note, everybody's going to want to contact you. So why don't you give a quick shout out, Kevin, to how to get a hold of you, so that our marketing friends can right away say double your budget.
Yeah, thanks. So the company I work with is we're called Team Resources. There's all of 3 of us at the company. We're smaller than boutique. Team Resources at forteamresources.com, FOR teamresources.com. But if you Google Team Resources and Credit Union, you'll find us. And I'm always available, and I'm happy to chat with folks and help out wherever I can.
It's a good recommendation to all of our marketing friends to take to your board, to your senior team. And we'll make sure, Kevin, to link your information when we release this podcast. But we appreciate your time today, your knowledge, and your fun spirit. You board whisperer, you.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. We'll talk soon, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us.